Hi everybody. So this is my paper walkthrough. I'm Jeanette from Get Geared Up. I've been tutoring environmental management. Oh golly, I don't know, about 13 years or so. So this is paper 21 of the May-June series. Um, and I'm going to whiz through this paper. Um, Basically it's about this starts out about New Zealand. It gives us a map of New Zealand and it tells us a little bit of information. Oops, there's a typo there. Let's sort that out. So the first question is state one fact from the source information that indicates New Zealand is a more economically developed country in MEDC. So that's why I'd got this writing on here because I was like, okay, let's look at the facts. So we've got a low birth rate, 1.86 children per woman, and high life expectancy. Either of those is going to show it's an MEDC. Describe the typical population pyramid of an MEDC. Now, it does want you to literally describe what it looks like. So it's not necessarily saying a low birth rate, high life expectancy, fairly straight up and down. It kind of wants that straight up and down, not like a triangle kind of thing. So fairly straight sides with a narrow base and top and wider middle. That's basically it. And then usually for an MEDC, you've got a very similar male and female split, although you could argue women have a slightly longer life expectancy. And it's going to be high because people live longer. That's all they want. 25% of the population of New Zealand live on the South Island. So remember with paper two, population's always up here. It's 5.1 million. So you can choose, you can either do 25% times 5.1 and add the word million. So do 25% times 5.1 and add the word million, or change 5.1 million into 5, 1 and 5 noughts and do your multiplication. Circulate the best estimate for the percentage of the total area of land of South Island occupied by Canterbury, Otago, and Southland. Well, that's why these are underlined. I'm like, okay, just I've got an ADHD brain, so I made sure I underline them, and that looks like about 3/4, doesn't it? It's not going to be less than that, and it's not 90%. They're the main regions for growing crops, and it says explain why changing the crops grown in fields each year is sustainable. So it wants to know what's the benefit of crop rotation, basically. So it keeps the soil more fertile because different crops use different nutrients, reduces the risk of pests and disease because they're different for different crops, and it talks about keeping a crop in the field, which means you're reducing soil erosion because there's vegetation to hold the roots together. This is just a simple add. Calculate the total rainfall. There it is. I've done it mentally, so I had to do it listed down vertically because that's the way I work. 631, I made it. Picture of drought. Explain means give reasons how climate change may cause drought. So, whenever you get a climate change question, you're going to talk about greenhouse gases. And whenever you talk about greenhouse gases, you're going to name a couple. So increased greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide and methane. I'm hoping that might be 2 marks. Enhance the greenhouse effect, causing global warming. It's definitely going to be a mark or two there. Well, how does that cause drought? Well, that means there's more evaporation, so therefore less surface water, because if it's a hot, sunny day, everything evaporates quicker. And so I'm thinking, well, I think I've got my 3 marks there, but just in case, I'm going to add a bit just to be sure, because you never know what's on the mark scheme exactly. So climate change means there are changing weather patterns and more extreme weather, so it leads to more droughts. 2 pieces, 2 means in bold only 2. If you do more than 2, they'll ignore the last one. They'll only mark the first 2. Evidence in the photograph suggests drought, compacted soil, and dry or cracked soil. That might have been 2 separate marks, but if it is, they take dry first and ignore cracked. They're both going to be right anyway. Or you could have said no vegetation. 3 ways the impact of drought can be managed on farms. Now, when they're talking about managing the impact, it can be preventative, right? It doesn't have to be, oh, you've got a drought now, what are you going to do? It can be kind of managing the impact of something, can be preventative measures. So need to increase irrigation, such as trickle drip. And it's always good to give an example of an irrigation if you mention it. Use drought resistant crops and make stores for rainwater, so rainwater harvesting. Right, this describe the process of pollination when an insect such as a bee moves pollen from the anther to the stigma of a plant. That's rarely been on the exams, I have to say. And in the past, I basically used to skip over it. I didn't even really contemplate. Excuse me, I'm really tired tonight. Contemplate pollination, and then realised it was on the scheme, and I hadn't included it in my course. So more recently, it's shown up. Fertilizers are used to maintain high yields of apples. State two mineral ions. So it's the mineral ions, not nitrogen, not the gas. So nitrates, phosphates, or potassium. Easy water cycle question. Just be very careful looking at the arrows. Arrows down from the soil is always infiltration. That's obviously precipitation, and this is going to be groundwater flow from the ones they've got given us. If it was surface runoff, the arrow would be like that. It would be over the top of the ground towards water. How can farmers prevent fertilizers entering streams and rivers, so creating eutrophication, right? Well, obviously, don't fertilize the ground when it's pouring with rain. So check out the weather so that the rain doesn't wash them away. Or don't use them if it's windy so that the wind doesn't blow them away. Secondly, buffer zones, buffer areas around the fields like hedgerows. A, that's going to stop wind erosion. And B, it's going to stop a bit of runoff. Okay. Or thirdly, and notice how I've used my connectives just to try and show the examiner, hey, look, 1, 2, 3 points for 3 marks. Just use the correct amount of fertilizer. Measure it carefully. We don't want excess going into our streams and rivers. This was one of those scale questions where I use the scale to estimate the actual length of the fish shown. I'm on a computer, and so I've basically copied and pasted a line about the same length as that one and tried to roughly join them up. I've guessed at about 75, which is what's on the mark scheme. That's about right. 20, 40, 60. That would be 80. That's going to be, so that's 20, 40, 60, 70, and probably about halfway, given mine's not very accurate. Yours would be better. Food chain. Why are algae producers? Because they produce their own food through photosynthesis. They produced glucose, and it's 2 marks, so I'm going to just expand on that. They photosynthesize using energy from the sun to produce their own glucose. Secondary consumer, so producer, primary, secondary, small fish. The meaning of the arrows, they often ask this, it's energy flow or energy transfer between the organisms. Difference between a food chain and a food web. I got myself tied up in knots trying to answer this. I couldn't think of the easiest way to describe it. But a food chain is one set of feeding relationships. X eats Y eats Z, right? Whereas the food web shows interconnected food chains. I think that would get the mark. Right, this is about total allowable catch, so quotas, and it's the catch for the yellow eye mullet, and it fluctuates quite a bit, right? Highest annual catch, 15, 16, 17. Lowest annual catch was 5. It's an easy mark. The graph shows it's sustainable. Why? Describe one piece of evidence from the graph that supports this view. Well, basically, it's the fact that it fluctuates, and after a high catch year, you've still got quite a high catch, and after a low catch year, you've got a high catch. So it's basically sustainable because it's not showing overfishing. It's not starting out high and going lower and lower and lower over time, is it? It's fluctuating. And the other thing is they've marked on the total allowable commercial catch, and you're nowhere near it. You're never reaching that, right? So the catch fluctuates throughout the time period, showing that the catch recovers after a low catch. or catches are never above the total allowable catch. Now, this is one of the annoying questions for somebody like me with my kind of brain, because it says, here's some options from another scientist. Now, this has just told us it's sustainable. And then this one goes, another scientist says, look, there's three options to support sustainable fishing. Let's reduce the total allowable catch to 29, 17, or 10 tons per year. Suggest one reason why the scientist recommends option three. Well, I couldn't think of a good one, because the reality is, look, it's way off 30 usually. I mean, reducing it to 20 won't make any difference, will it? So, reducing it to 29 or even really 17 isn't going to change anything, is it? But we know it's already sustainable. So in my brain, this doesn't work, this question. So I just put, it's got the lowest total allowable catch, which means it's most likely to stop overfishing, because the lower you have it, the more the fish are going to recuperate. But it doesn't make sense to me, if I'm honest. And that's the kind of question in an exam I'd spend ages on it, because I'd be like, well, it doesn't make sense. What are they trying to find out? And if you get a question like that, just state the obvious. So quotas and one management for fishing. So this is your whole section on overfishing. So do you remember smaller nets, larger mesh size, closed seasons, protected areas? We've already talked about quotas. All of these prevent overfishing and make it more sustainable. So legislate for bigger mesh in nets to allow juvenile fish to escape. Set up closed seasons, restricting fishing to set times and not breeding season. And then set up restricted areas or no catch areas to allow stocks to recover. There are so many things you could say for that. Nice question. Right, this is where it's important to read the question. I often whiz along. There is salmon fish. Blah, 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 blah. There is salmon fish farming in the cold water around Stewart Island, right? There we are. There's the fish catches. And we had to do a bar graph, right? Remember, label it from the table. So you copy off the table headings and you put it there. I went up in ones. That was fairly easy. I could have put a 0 here, actually. Let's just do that. Let's do that if it works. There we go. Oh, got a bit weird, isn't it? Oh, this is interesting. Why are you being so odd? Let me spread it out. There we are. Make sure the bars are of equal widths and equally spaced apart. This one's not quite. It needs to move over just slightly. Bear in mind, I am doing this on a laptop. They're meant to be all there, basically. So there's the mark scheme, and basically that's easy. Right, now, the percentage increase. Do you remember percentage increases? So 2 marks. First, you work out the difference. So it's from 2016 to 2020. So 3.8 to 4.6. So the first sum is 4.6 minus 3.8, which is 0.8. Then you divide that by the original amount, the lowest amount, times by 100, which is 21.0526, and you round that up to 21%. Rounding in EM is annoying because there's no set rules, but basically you don't need a load of decimals. I mean, with something as tiny as that as a decimal, you're just going to round up to 20, round down to 21. Now, this is why I'd underline that bit about cold water. In 2020, the sea was 6 degrees above the mean temperature. Suggests one and only one reason why the mass of salmon exports decreased. Well, I put salmon thrive better in cold water. I think the mark scheme said something like they grow better in cold water, but I think my answer was fine. Right. Enhanced greenhouse effect. Now, the trouble with this is remembering what to put to get you 3 marks and knowing what's going to be on the mark scheme for sure. So you end up having to write more just in case it's those bits that aren't on the mark scheme. So it's talking about how the enhanced greenhouse effect causes increased ocean temperatures. Well, we know it causes climate change, but they don't want climate change alone, do they? They want increased ocean temperatures. So now, whenever I see greenhouse effect, you're going to mention fossil fuels being burned, which gives off greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and methane, right? You could have put amorphous and because of increased cattle farming. So cows giving off methane is probably a better answer, but I don't think that's even on the mark scheme in this case. But trouble is, you don't really know what's definitely going to be on the mark scheme, so it kind of doesn't hurt. I've only filled in the lines, it doesn't matter. I'm a quick thinker, so I know I'm not going to run out of time. So as more fossil fuels are burned in cars and factories, and because of increased cattle farming, more greenhouse gases such as CO2 and methane are produced and enter the atmosphere. Definitely going to get a mark for saying greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide and methane. I'm sure that's the case. Now, I've got to think of a couple of more marks here. So enhanced greenhouse effect. So I need to say what that is. So light energy from the sun coming to the Earth's surface, heat's reflected from the surface, it's trapped by the greenhouse gases, then reflected back and absorbed, but by the Earth and oceans, causing warming. So it's this idea that they're trapped and it's causing global warming, but that some is being reflected into the Earth's surface and the oceans and absorbed by them to cause warming. Didn't like that question. Right, this one, 3 impacts of a fish farm. It's talking about having an EIA to show the impacts. Now, I did 2, increased fish waste causing eutrophication. Yeah, obviously. Got more fish farms, got more fish poo going out into the sea. Fish poo, what's it do? It's fertilizer, isn't it? So it's going to cause eutrophication, more algae, whatever. Diseases can spread to wild fish. We learned that in the course. And then I was like, okay, what's another bad impact? Uh, and I was really struggling. And then I was like, it could be a positive impact. So remember, impact could mean positive or negative. So you could say more jobs in the area, or you could say a decrease in overfishing. Open pit, open cast mine, that's easy, or surface mining. Now, I've never seen this before. A risk to the workers here. Usually it's a question about the risk to workers of shaft mining, being underground and explosions and fires and being trapped by mine tunnels collapsing, etc. This, you're like, oh, I've got to think about that. Well, it's just landslides, isn't it? We've talked about the fact that they dig it in benches, these benches to prevent landslides. So a risk is a landslide, right? Or rocks falling. Name 2 other types of rocks. Easy peasy. This was an annoying question. Components of soil, right? What do we learn them as being? Minerals, organic matter, air, and water. But they've already put minerals and they've already put living plants, which are organic matter. So I was like, well, it can't be organic matter. Well, it could be microorganisms, but that's organic as well. So that really annoyed me. And I had to look on the mark scheme. And actually, these are both on the mark scheme, even though living plants are already mentioned. So that was really annoying. Could have put dead plants, but that is organic matter. So it's just annoying. Silly question. Okay. Oh, goodo. An investigation. This is a paper 2 after all. So it's a scientist investigating grass growth in waste rock. I don't know why. The scientist collects seeds from one species of grass. Now, I'm going to admit that when I did this paper, I didn't really read this bit. I just went to the answers because I usually can do it without reading it. But I fell short, and I'll tell you why. Because it collects seeds from one species of grass, can only grow in a pH range of that. 5 pots with soil, 5 pots with waste rock, 10 seeds in a pot. Waters each pot every 5 days. So he's told you the frequency of watering is the same. And then he's measuring the heights, right? I'm counting the flowers. So explain why the scientist includes pots with soil. Well, it's to compare, isn't it? It's a control to compare the others to compare the growth of the tallest leaf, the height of the tallest leaf. Easy peasy. Now, suggest 3 factors the scientists should keep the same. So I'm like, oh, same species. And then, oh, my first answer was same species of grass, water with the same amount of water and the same frequency, etc. And then I checked the mark scheme and I was like, why isn't that on there? I don't understand that. Of course, it's got to be the same species of grass. And I went back and read the blimming question, and there it is. They've put it there already. Grr. So read the question carefully. So I've put same volume of soil or waste rock, same volume of water and temperature, or same amount of light or humidity would also be fine. Now, up until now, I've always taught amount. They've never had to be specific and say volume. But this year, the mark scheme says volume, so we better be better with our maths and say volume. So same volume. Right, 2 and only 2 because it's in bold, suitable conclusions. Well, look at this. The easy one is there's no flowers on the waste rock. And then the other easy one is that the height of the tallest leaf is very short, much shorter. So it's stunted, shorter or stunted. He or she wants to use GM to produce a grass that is resistant. How? So find the plant that is resistant, extract the genes for resistance. I should say resistance, and implant them into the grass plant. Another annoying question. This is a mine that's closed several years ago. There has been some bioremediation. That's nice. Suggest how bioremediation can be used to restore the mine. Now, this is the second time I have seen a question exactly like this and thought, how can you get but 4 marks to talking about bioremediation, which is basically using microbes or bacteria to take out the pollutants out of the ground, okay? You can have bioremediation where you plant plants into the ground and they draw the toxins up into their roots and into their leaves, and then you cut them down. That's another way, but it's not going to be 4 marks. So I'm like racking my brains thinking, how on earth can that be 4 marks? It can't be. And it talks about mine restoration. So maybe they want the extra stuff. Sure enough, you go to the mark scheme and they want the extra stuff. So mine restoration is always add soil, add fertilizer. It's been in the past. Well, this time it says organic matter. So notice I slipped in or organic matter. I've always said topsoil, fertilizer, plant vegetation. But now this in 2024, they've changed that to organic matter, which is better fertilizer, but it's better than chemical fertilizer, but could be fertilizer. It's going to become a nature reserve. 2 benefits. Well, I always say increasing habitat leading to more biodiversity. Turns out on the mark scheme that is 2 marks. So they would basically ignore this point. But it doesn't matter because I've got my 2 marks. The other thing I thought was they usually have restrictions that protect flora and fauna. You know, like keep to the paths, watch out for the such and such, or they have an area where you can't actually access and trample on the orchids or whatever. Gold production. Describe the trends. Well, it's 2 marks. So they don't want much. So, I mean, it's a fluctuating graph and overall there's a decrease, basically. And then just for good measure, I've thrown in some numbers because often a graph question requires numbers. So gold production fluctuates from 12.25 tons in 2010 to a peak in 2015, and then it generally decreases to 5.8 tons in 2020. But you probably could have got away with it fluctuates and there's an overall decrease. Now, this is an interesting one. A new gold mine is planned in New Zealand. Suggests reasons why some people object to it. Well, ordinarily, I'd have said your five pollutions: visual, air, noise, land, water, right? And I'd have rambled on about those for 3 marks. Three of those 3 marks. In this mark scheme, it seems they've all been clumped together. So I had to think of a couple more things. So you never know how much you're going to get for these things, because I'd have thought the pollutions would have been a mark each, but no. So mining causes visual pollution, causing an eyesore. It could cause noise pollution, which will scare animals away. It causes loss of habitat, which leads to loss of biodiversity. I teach that a lot as an answer. And the mine would need significant infrastructure built, such as road and rail links, which could increase the air pollution from transport. I'm hedging my bets here because I don't know what's on the mark scheme. And with the suggest question, it's a good idea to do that. It's a good idea to put, if it's 3, put 5, and then you're likely to get 3. Oh gosh, that's it. I felt that that was a really easy paper too. I don't know what you thought. Share your views in the comments, and I hope you found this useful. Another one will be following very shortly. Goodbye.